This presentation will seek to provide information around the process for AusIndustry findings and seeking approval to claim overseas R&D activities. This presentation has been based on two AusIndustry guidance publications which are available on their website: AusIndustry's Guide to Findings and an AusIndustry publication titled "What Does Not Available in Australia Mean?" A finding is a decision by AusIndustry on behalf of Innovation Australia about the eligibility of a company's activities relative to the R&D tax incentive legislation. Findings are usually made on where activities are core, supporting, or ineligible R&D activities, whether overseas R&D activities meet the additional requirements for approval. The objective of a finding is to provide certainty to companies about their entitlement to the R&D tax incentive, or facilitate compliance activity where an examination or audit is instigated by either AusIndustry or the ATO. Findings are binding on both Innovation Australia and the ATO. The R&D tax incentive is administered jointly by two government agencies, ATO and AusIndustry. AusIndustry, whose scope includes registering and assessing activities, employ officers who are delegated certain powers in relation to findings. During the finding process, AusIndustry officers will conduct the initial investigation into the merits of activities or the technology being developed that is the subject of a proposed finding. Gather relevant information to analyse whether activities meet the legislative requirements. Provide information to Innovation Australia in a report, and make a recommendation based on evidence relating to the finding that should be made. There are 5 types of findings that may occur. 1. Advance findings, which concern the eligibility of activities before those activities are registered. 2. Overseas findings, which determine eligibility of R&D activities to be conducted outside Australia against the specific rules for overseas R&D. 3. Findings about a registration application. These are about activities described in a registration application before they are registered. 4. Core technology findings relate to where a company has purchased technology for use in R&D activity. And 5. Post-registration findings are about activities that have been registered and arise when a company's claim is selected for review. When a company lodges and instigates a finding, these are usually advance and overseas findings. This is, the company will lodge the finding with AusIndustry. Advance and overseas findings must be made before the end of the income year in which the activity was conducted. Activities conducted during FY20 must have a finding lodged before the 30th of June 2020. Within the finding application, company must describe the activity and provide supporting evidence that allows AusIndustry to understand and assess the activity against the legislation. The ATO and AusIndustry is bound as to the eligibility of activities for 3 years based on the determination of the finding. AusIndustry or the ATO may also instigate findings arise during compliance proceedings. Findings to be made by AusIndustry can occur before registration or after the registration occurs. In a self-assessment regime, post-registration findings are most common. These can occur after a company has lodged a claim and received their benefit. Following a registration, Innovation Australia can examine a company's activities for the purposes of making a finding about their eligibility. The company is able to provide information and documentation to assist with the finding. If activity is found to be ineligible, the finding is binding on the ATO, who must then amend tax assessments to reduce the relevant R&D tax offsets claimed. Findings are made on the basis of information from multiple sources including the company's finding application, subsequent meetings and correspondence with the company, information provided by the company in response to information requests from AusIndustry. research, including literature searches by Oz Industry officers during their assessment of the finding, and independent experts engaged to provide opinions on particular cases. Should a company disagree with the finding decision, they can request an internal review. It is also important to note that there are specific requirements for the claiming of overseas activities, which apply in addition to the general eligibility criteria. There is a specific overseas finding application for companies seeking to claim overseas R&D activity, which must be lodged for a company to demonstrate how the specific requirements are met. Companies are not able to claim overseas R&D activities until their overseas finding has been lodged, assessed, and approved by Oz Industry. There are 4 conditions to be met for a finding to be successfully made that overseas activities are eligible under the R&D tax incentive. The activities must be covered by an advance finding stating that the activities are eligible. The activities must have a significant scientific link to one or more Australian core activities registered. The activities must be unable to be conducted within Australia because of specified reasons. Expenditure on activities conducted overseas must not exceed expenditure on certain Australian activities. The first condition is that the relevant overseas activity must be the subject of a finding. Oz Industry provides a form that allows an overseas and advance finding to be made in the one application. The application must be made in the first income year that the overseas activities are conducted and cannot be made for activities conducted in previous income years. The second condition is that the overseas activity must have a significant scientific link to one or more Australian core R&D activities. In order to demonstrate a significant scientific link to Australian core activities, the company must be able to demonstrate that the Australian core activities cannot be completed without the relevant overseas activity being conducted. The third condition is that the activity cannot be conducted solely in Australia because of one of the following factors. Conducting the activity requires access to a facility, expertise, or equipment not available in Australia, or conducting the activity in Australia will contravene a law relating to quarantine, or conducting the activity requires access to a population of living things not available in Australia, or conducting the activity requires access to a geographical or geological feature not available in Australia. Finally, the fourth condition is that the financial commitment to the Australian core activities and their related Australian supporting activities must exceed the financial commitment to all relevant overseas activities. This means that over the life of a project, expenditure on the related Australian activities must exceed expenditure on the total overseas activities. During an overseas finding, Oz Industry is likely to scrutinise Condition 3 the most, with respect to why an overseas activity cannot be conducted solely in Australia. Oz Industry has published specific guidance on this issue. Some notable extracts from Oz Industry guidance includes: Oz Industry considers that expertise not available means that a company is unable to find or access the expertise required for the project in Australia. A company must be able to show that it conducted a reasonable Australia-wide search and/or advertising campaign and can provide evidence that it was unable to obtain the necessary expertise in Australia. Examples of evidence may include independent advice from research organisations, industry associations, or other relevant organisations or individuals addressing the lack of available expertise. If a company has not carried out its own thorough investigation of Australian-based expertise or experience, or attempted to recruit in Australia, a reasonable explanation substantiated with evidence must be provided. In some cases, a supplier may exist which appears to have the capability to conduct an activity but does not have any proven experience in conducting such activities. The risk of not gaining credible results may be a reason why expertise is not available in Australia. Examples of evidence to demonstrate the lack of availability of facilities or equipment may include a letter of advice from research organisations, industry associations, or other independent organisations. Oz Industry considers that not available in Australia means there are insufficient suitable human, plant, or other animal subjects that would be necessary to conduct the activity in Australia. Oz Industry considers not available in Australia means there is an absence of, for example, a particular rock or soil type, mountain or valley of a specific height, or environment of a particular type relevant to the conduct of the activities in Australia, and this feature is unable to be appropriately and readily replicated by some other means. Oz Industry expects that companies provide appropriate evidence to demonstrate their claims, specifically that the feature is not available in Australia and why it cannot be replicated. In recent years, Oz Industry has placed emphasis on companies attaining expert opinions on the need to conduct the activity overseas. If a company cannot attain such an opinion, the prospect of receiving a successful finding is diminished. The Oz Industry guidance indicates such opinion statements from experts should include statement of the expert's credentials, disclosure of any relationship with the company that may give rise to a conflict, explanation of why the activity satisfied the appropriate allowable reason. That concludes this presentation of the process for findings and seeking approval to claim overseas R&D activities. Should you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with our office. There is also additional material available on our website, as well as the website of the ATO and AHS Industry. Thank you.